All right, welcome back. So we're jumping into phase 5, which is the creation of various aspects of our level 1, our start, and our end scenes. So according to this, we have a bunch of settings down at the bottom of this page, and then when we come back, we can finish up with several of these other kind of housekeeping items to make sure everything is correctly updating. So let's jump down to the bottom by using this Use Settings Below link. All right, so if you click on that, it should take you down to the bottom, about, well, halfway down the page. And we see that this is the scene hierarchy for whatever level you happen to be building. Level 1, 2, 3, that kind of stuff. If we scroll down just a little bit, there's the start scene hierarchy, and a little bit further, there's the end scene hierarchy. So I'm going to walk through this document. I've got it loaded up on my other monitor, and I'm going to walk through this inside Unity, building all the different features, and setting up all the different settings. So as you're following along, you should be watching this scene grow and prefabs being created and that kind of stuff. It helps you stay organized with further level creation and that kind of stuff. So please don't just ignore the different settings and the different callouts to the different updates. Please follow along. Again, rewinding if you need to double check and verify all your different settings. So again, this is open on my other screen so I can see what's actually happening. And now I'm going to jump back over to Unity. Now, here inside level 1, I need to make some adjustments to how this scene actually looks. Now, according to our Arkanoid layout image, we have like a lives, we have score, and that kind of stuff. We're going to do something similar. Remember to the demo earlier, we had score in the upper left, we had bricks in the upper right. So we're going to create some of those things, but then also lay some other objects out. So over here, we want to take that main camera and that directional light, and we want to group those together because every level is going to have a camera, every level is going to have a light, but at the moment, we need to make some adjustments to their position, some of their settings, so that they kind of stay out of our way as we're building. Because you might notice the light is actually right here in the center of where our brick construction area is. So we don't want that to be in the way. And then also we talked about that the camera is kind of looking at this image a little weird. So we want to fix some of these things. But as I said, every level is going to have basically the exact same setup. So it makes sense to prefabricate or prefab our objects that end up being reused. That's why I made the game manager a prefab, because we'll reuse it elsewhere, and I don't want to have to create another new empty game object and attach the script and go through all that stuff just to take advantage of a feature we've already done. You know, this kind of goes back to the dry principle. Don't repeat yourself. That mainly is for code, but it also applies here. And that's why prefabs are awesome, because you can make changes to the asset down here, and that will propagate to the instances up here as long as there's no override. So in order to make those adjustments, I want to create an empty game object. And again, because I've moved my debug camera around a little bit, it's off center, so I want to go to the gear and reset. This game object, I want to rename it to be cam space and space light. So basically the camera and light parent container. And I want to take the main camera and the directional light. I used Control Select to pick each one of those. So with one selected, I can press and hold Control to pick the other one. I want to drag and drop those two onto the cam and light. So now they're children of it. Now the main camera, it's currently positioned at 0 in the X, Y of 1, and Z of 10. Now the Z of 10 is great. It pulls us back along the Z axis. The X is perfectly fine. That's the red axis over here. So we don't want to go left or right, but we're dealing with an up-down scenario. So that Y of 1, let's change that to Y of 0. Now notice the image is a little bit more centered because it's relative. If the camera goes up or down, it'll look like the image goes up and down. If the image goes up and down, it'll look like the camera goes up and down. Everything's relative in these kinds of coordinate spaces. So one can go up or down, the other can go up or down. It'll look the same. But I want to put everything basically on the 0 axis, the 0 of Y and of X. So we just zero those things out. Leave Z at -10, otherwise you'll run into some camera colliding with this image issue. The next thing we want to do is, since the final version of this game is actually going to have this image turned off, so if I click on Arkanoid image and turn it off right here, you'll notice we've got this sky dome way out there in the distance. And that is not conducive to a 2D game. That's more of a 3D game kind of thing. So what I actually want to do is change the way the camera sees the outside world. It's not going to have, so I picked the main camera, it's not going to have skybox. It is actually going to have solid color. And what I did earlier in pre-production is I color matched to different aspects of this original Arkanoid layout. So I picked some kind of blue here, and this is subjective. You can change this to whatever you particularly want, but I picked a blue color. So right here, since we changed to color, you'll notice I have a background color. And if I use the color picker here, this item, I'm currently in 0 to 255 mode. And what I want to do is match one of those colors. I could use the eyedropper to kind of try to find a match, but I've already calculated this, and this information, by the way, just in case, it's all listed as I'm walking through the document. So I want this blue color of a 0, 0, 173, 0. So if I'm calling out numbers, realize it's coming directly from this document. That should be your resource, your lookup guide. So as we said, the camera's background color is going to be 0, 0, 173, and in this case, this last 0 is the alpha channel. For a background, it doesn't matter. But later on, as we're constructing the UI, the score and the bricks, it absolutely matters. If you change the alpha, your items will start to become more and more transparent, all the way to completely transparent, and we want them to actually be completely opaque. We want to be able to see them. So 0, 0, 173, 0 gives us this blue that kind of matches one of these little hex cells out here. The next piece is right here under projection. Now at the moment, what you'll notice is the camera, if I move this around, the camera is emitting this kind of giant pyramid. And if you were to look really close at the camera over here, you'll notice it actually is, it's not a full pointed pyramid. It's actually got the top chopped off. So that's the near clipping plane, and the far, the one way out there, the far clipping plane. And then everything inside this pyramid is visible to the camera. Well, we don't want the pyramid because that actually provides perspective. It gives us what's referred to as foreshortening. So objects that are closer appear larger, objects that are farther away appear smaller. We want it to be a uniform height all the way down from the beginning to the end. So in order to change that, we want to go over here to projection and change it from perspective to orthographic. And what will happen is when you change to orthographic, the pyramid now becomes this big elongated cube, and notice that our camera now no longer sees the border outside of the image. So that's the matching that we were worried about earlier. Okay, so according to the notes, now would be a good time to turn off the Arkanoid layout image. So I'm going to pick it and turn it off, and I'll periodically come back as we're kind of matching up where the bricks and UI and paddle and ball are. But for the moment, let's go ahead and just turn that off. And now the next piece, we just finished up with the camera, so the next piece is the directional light. Now again, because it's right there in the way, and if I come over here to my game view and turn on gizmos, you'll see it's right there in the middle of where I'm going to be constructing stuff. So turn gizmos off. The idea here is, as I'm building up my objects, I'm actually wanting to be more of in more of a 2D kind of layout here. So what I want to do is this 2D button right up here at the top. I'm going to click that, and that's going to spin me around, and I see the square that represents the cube that the camera is looking through. So I'm going to use Alt and right click to kind of, and then left click to pan around, right click to zoom in and out. I'm going to move this around a little bit, and unfortunately in the scene view we still see that skybox out there in the back, and I think I can turn it off by using, let's see here, where are you? This guy right here? Yeah, this one, toggle skybox, fog, and various other effects. So I can toggle it and turn that skybox off way out there in the background. Okay, so now this is much more of what you'd see in like a 2D editor, but again, we're still working in 3D. So what I want to do is take that light and, number one, just get it out of the way so that as we're building up our bricks in this general area, it doesn't conflict. Also, notice how the rays coming out of the light are at this down and to the left. Well, if you notice, with it selected, I'm going to press F to kind of focus in on it and kind of zoom. If I orbit around it, what you'll notice is it's kind of down to the left and forward on the Z. Well, that's because it has a rotation. So if I now go back to my 2D, zoom back out and recenter my view here. If we come over here to the directional light, its transform, what we want to do is to get it out of our work area, let's change its Y from 3 to 10. All that does is moves it just above our working area up there. I also want to change its rotation in the X and Y from 50, let's drop that to 0, and from -30 to 0. Now what that has done is, if I drop out of 2D mode, it has put the light, shining its light, those rays, straight down the Z axis. So this means that we're going to get uniform illumination on all of our bricks and paddle and ball later on, so we don't have like weird shadows casting in different directions. So that really helps to kind of calm the scene down just a little bit. In addition, we want to go through and change the light that this camera is emitting. Now normally it's kind of this like kind of toned down, kind of warm yellowish color. I don't want this color contribution to be impacting my bricks, because everyone is going to have a material that's going to have a specific color, and I want just those colors to shine through. So I want to change the light to be 100% white. Now I could change each one of these values down through here, the RGB, but I want to just click in this square and kind of go up to the upper left corner. So that zeros, or not zero, it maxes everything out. So 255 straight down the line. So just make sure that every one of these values is 255. The side effect of this is that now the scene actually gets blown out. It gets washed out because the intensity is just way too high. So I actually want to turn down the intensity, drop that down to 0.5, and let's see, 1 second. Make a note to myself to remind, or to show you guys how to sort out the lighting, because different scenes need their lighting recalculated, and so that question comes up every so often. So I want to remember to show you that towards the end of the level creation process. So now that we have the light, its intensity turned down, so it's not going to blow out our scene, we can or wash out our scene, I guess is the proper term. Wash out our scene. Now we can start creating the actual canvas for our bricks and our score. So actually, before we do that, now that we've finished up with our camera and our light, let me go back into 2D mode over here. Pull this area back up, and then I want to take the cam and light and drag and drop it down onto the prefabs folder to make it into a prefab. That way we can reuse it in other levels. And also, since it's been a while since I've saved this level, let's go ahead and Control S to save. So now the next piece is to construct the actual canvas that we see, the actual text in the upper left and upper right corners. So with nothing selected over here, I'm going to right click, I'm in the hierarchy, go down to UI, and I'm going to use the first item, text. Now this text is actually going to be the score. Now the idea is I'm going to write some code that is, as we move from level to level, it's going to look for specific names, game objects with specific names, and it's going to bind to those game objects. It's going to bind some code to those, very similar to what we saw in the week 2 project where we attach to our main text. So here, the first thing I want to do is rename this text object. So instead of being just text, I want to rename it to score space text. Now, the score text and the bricks text, they're going to be very similar. So I'm going to customize this text object, and then when we duplicate it, we'll get a lot of our settings for free. And we just need to tweak a couple of extra values. So now that it's called score text, the item needs to be put in the upper left corner. So to do that, I'm going to click on this little crosshair looking thing. This is actually a button. And if you click that, you'll get this anchor presets. Now, along the top is a left, center, right stretch. And then along the left is a top, middle, bottom stretch. And so these can put your UI in different spots. And actually, just so you can see what's actually happening, I'm going to click off of that. And I still have my score text selected, so I'm going to pick the canvas, mouse over the scene view, and press F. This will take me way out and show me the entire canvas. For those of you curious why down here in the bottom corner, that is where our camera and all of our little, like our bricks and our paddle and that kind of stuff is going to exist, and our canvas is this monstrously large item. The reasoning behind that is when Unity was creating this UI tech, they wanted to make every pixel one Unity unit. That way the math just worked out a little better. So one Unity unit, according to the documentation, is roughly 1 meter. And here, 1 pixel is basically 1 Unity unit. So since we're dealing with a resolution of 896 by 1024, if you were to create a cube, which is 1 unit large, and you were to stack 896 of them side by side, or top to bottom, and 1024 of them side by side, top to bottom, you would be able to fill up this entire region. So just realize 1 pixel is equal to 1 Unity unit, and that's why this size is so ridiculously different. So I'm going to kind of zoom in so that the canvas is taking up this area, and you'll see right down here is where our text box is. Now, the default size of this box actually comes with some technology that will clip the string. If the string in here gets too long, like if I demonstrate that, it's a little difficult to see right there, but if my text gets really long, notice I'm still typing, but it stopped right here. So that box is actually truncating or actually it's trying to word wrap, but then it's also truncating, so it's chopping off the value when it word wraps around. So it's not necessarily the behavior that we want. So I'm going to undo that, and let's customize this guy just a little bit. So I want to put this text object in the upper left corner of my screen, so of my canvas. So we go back to this crosshair, this anchor presets button, and what we want to do is pick the item right here that matches this column, this left, and then top. So that match right there. And what we want to do is also, notice right here underneath anchor presets, it says shift. If you press and hold shift, you'll also set the pivot. And if you press and hold alt or option on a Mac, you'll also set the position. So if I press and hold shift, you'll notice that many of these little boxes down here, they get this little blue dot. That, again, shift is the pivot. So that's that little blue circle right there in the center. And if I press and hold alt, you'll notice that the position inside each one of these images kind of jumps. So like here, they're going to the upper right corner, upper left corner, that kind of stuff. So I want to set both of them. So I'm going to press and hold shift and alt, and I'm going to pick this item right here that matches left top. And when you click that, your text should jump to the upper left corner, and let go of that, and you can click elsewhere to close that dialog. So now, as you kind of move your canvas around, you can kind of preview it, it will move along with that location, should you find yourself moving it around. The little 4 triangles up here, triangles in the corner, those are your anchors. So it's anchored width-wise, horizontal, vertical, height, as well as its upper left corner to that corner. Okay, so now that it's up there, let's actually give it a slight offset. We want to pull it into the scene just a little bit. And again, it's a little difficult to see, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and I'm using the again, the mouse button, or if you press and hold Alt or Option, you can kind of look and see that as much as I pull this to go into the upper left corner, it's butted right up against that edge. So what I want to do is pull it into the scene just a little bit. So with the score text selected, I want to change my X position to be 10. And later on, when we correct for its vertical alignment, that'll pull it down to make it look like a Y of 10. So it'll look correct in just a second. But now we want to change the text. So the current text, new text, we actually want that to be kind of a placeholder, because the code is going to try to find this object. If the name is different, if it can't find it, then we'll see the placeholder and we'll know that something went wrong. But when the code does work, it'll replace it with the actual scoring information. So the placeholder that we want to use is going to be score, colon, space, and I'm going to put in 3 question marks. Okay, score, colon, space, and 3 question marks. Now, if we look down here underneath paragraph, we have alignment. Right now, this item is left aligned. That's fine. We want to come out from the left side, but we also want to change this next set of 3 buttons to be middle, which is that middle button right there. Which, notice, again, it's kind of difficult to see here. It pulls it down, so we're pretty well offset from that upper left corner. Now, if the score somehow managed to grow so it extended beyond the bounds of this little box right here, we don't want that truncation and wrapping that we saw earlier to happen. We want it to be allowed to grow as much as it can. So down here underneath horizontal and vertical overflow, right now it's set to wrap truncate. We want to change both of those to be overflow. So using those 2 settings, it no longer respects the width and height values of that box. And we also want to change the color. So again, to make it look more like what we saw in the Arkanoid layout, if we click on the color picker, the color well here, we can, in this case, I want to go with red. So slide that circle there all the way to the upper right of red. You can also manually punch in 255.00. And again, remember, the alpha channel will control its opacity. So if you slide that down to anything other than 255, see how it goes away and comes back? Which you can create some pretty cool features by doing that as well. So that sets up everything we need for that specific UI item, but we now need the one in the other corner. So I'm going to zoom out. I'm using the mouse wheel this time. So I want to take this score text right here in my hierarchy, duplicate it, so Control D, and I want to rename it. Now, it's important to realize that when you rename something, Unity will try, up here in the hierarchy, will give you a space, parenthesis, a number, and parenthesis. So that space can cause our string comparisons later on in code to fail. So you want to make doubly sure that you're picking up everything after that T. So space, parenthesis, number, parenthesis, and delete it. Now the score on the left-hand side, we want to change that to be bricks. So bricks, and there's an S in there, so watch for that. And there is a space between bricks and text, just like there was with score, space, text. So now that that's duplicated and named properly, by the way, if you have any issues later on where you're still seeing the question marks in either of these 2 corners, double check. And if you go into rename mode, Unity selects all the characters. So if you accidentally forgot and left a space on there, going into rename, you'll see it right there at the end. You got to look real close, but it's there. So make doubly sure that you get rid of those extra spaces. See, both of my score text and my bricks text do not have spaces at the end, so just watch out for that stuff. Now I need to take it, and it's currently just duplicated score. I need to move it to the upper right corner. To do that, I want to use the anchor presets one more time. Press and hold Shift and Alt, or Option if you're on a Mac. And this time, instead of using top left, we want to use top right. I'm 2 more columns over. And when you click on that, what you'll notice is we lost our 10 from the score text, and it's also still kind of way over here to the left, and that's because the alignment still thinks it's left aligned according to that box. So now we'll fix that in just a second, but for starters, let's fix the alignment. So if it were coming from the right, we actually don't want positive 10, like the left over here. We want negative 10 to pull it into the left of where its anchor point is. So let's change bricks text, its X position, to be negative 10. And the placeholder, well, we're not tracking score anymore, so select score right there in the text and change that to bricks. Now, under paragraph alignment, we're no longer left align, we are right align. So go ahead and click that right align. We don't need to change anything about the center, or sorry, the middle, because we're already using it. And we don't need to change the horizontal or vertical overflows because we're already, we picked up those values from the score text. And the color red, we also picked that up as well. But now if you look right here in our UI, our bricks, colon, 3 question marks is correctly coming in from the right. Okay. Now, if your level, for whatever reason, included buttons or like a toggle or like any of these things you can interact with, sliders and input fields, if for whatever reason you decided to add those, it's important to realize that Unity, in order to interact with those, it has to have an event system. If your scene does not have an event system and you're trying to interact with it, it doesn't know how to process those events. This is usually given to you by default when you first create either a canvas or some UI element. If for whatever reason your level does not currently have this, and by the way, that's this level, level 1, or your start or your end later on, any level, if it doesn't come with this, it looks like there might be a current bug that sometimes, it's kind of 50-50, whether or not you'll get this. And so if you need to create an event system, what you can do is right-click, UI, and it's right down here at the very bottom, just a few below canvas. So you can manually create one. Now, if you do create one, and for whatever reason it kind of flashes over here in the inspector, but doesn't show up in your hierarchy, go ahead and save your work and restart Unity. Usually the restart sorts it out. You don't have to reinstall or anything like that. Normally, the restart will fix it, because as soon as you come back in, if it's not there, try the right-click, UI, event system, and you'll get one. And then your buttons and that kind of stuff will start working. But since we know we'll have one of these things and we're going to have a canvas in all of our levels, it would be a good idea to turn our canvas into a prefab. But since we may have buttons elsewhere, we also want this event system. So what I'm going to do is drag and drop this event system into the canvas, just right above itself, and that'll make it a child of the canvas. So now I can take that canvas and turn it into a prefab. So click Canvas, drag and drop it onto the prefabs folder, and now it becomes a prefab up here, and a prefab instance up here, and a prefab asset down here. So let's go ahead and save that scene. And I'm going to stop the video and go back to the start and end scenes here in the next video.